So welcome to the 10th, believe it or not, CU Digital Town Hall. We've done 10 of these, and I keep, I'm trying to decide whether we'll continue these or we'll morph them into something else. So if you're finding value and you want to keep coming, you need to let me know. Or let Elizabeth know. I'm not sure where I want to go with that, but I want to thank our sponsors, CUSN, also Mike, CU Broadcast, as well as Member Pass, which I'm not sure Dante or Julie can be here today, so I'll speak to that a little bit. But very excited to continue to try to just bring people together and help. One of our regulars, Tom, couldn't make it today. Tom Shea from New York, he had a conflict, but he said he would see us next week. So if we do it next week, which I'm thinking we will, then we'll definitely get caught up there. So let's move on to the next slide there. So these are your hosts. The good-looking guy on the right's Mike, and the other one's John. Mike, thanks for always joining, and I'm sure you'll have some stuff to bring to this today. Let's go on to the next one. I think everybody knows the format, but I'll just go through it real fast. Just going to talk a little bit. If you want to chat, or if you want to, got questions for the group or whatever, we're going to highly encourage you to go onto the chat and let people know, let Melissa know. Because of Zoom bombing, we need everybody to check in just to make sure that we know who every person is. Because if we don't, we're going to remove you just to make sure we don't get any weirdness on the Zoom. If someone's talking and it's something that you feel like you need to know more about what they did, we encourage you to reach out directly to them. It seems like there are people who do that. So that's how I want to see people get connected. And then if there's any information that you think should be to a broader audience, then we hope that you'll put that in the everyone chat. And if it needs a longer discussion, then that will get moved over to CU Broadcast, which I highly encourage you to go check out. He's had a number of fantastic interviews with very pertinent information and very pertinent people. So if you're not keeping up with Mike, he's bringing it every week and bringing important information. These town halls are recorded. So if it is that you're here with someone you shouldn't be, like, I don't know, the goat, or you don't, there's certain things that you don't want to say, just realize that this will be published and it'll be out there for people to watch. So we just ask that you keep that in mind. With that, we'll go on to the next screen here. So just a little bit about the chat. If you haven't experienced Zoom before, which at this point feels like the whole world has, but there's a button down at the bottom that says chat. You click that, it'll open up the chat on the right. And then there's a little circle, you can see it's down on the bottom, that tells you who you're talking to. I've seen people think they're talking to everyone, but they're really just talking to one person, so keep an eye on that. And then that's how you can talk directly to someone without sort of engaging everyone else. And I already see people checking in, but please, if you haven't already, hop on, check in, let us know you're here. And if it is you want to speak, Melissa will get you lined up and let me know. Let's go on to the next slide. So we talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to just bring it up a bit. So last week we talked about that the stimulus checks are definitely going to cause a little bit of a run. I'll be interested in hearing what folks are talking about that and kind of what the mentality is and what we're seeing. We were also talking about the lack of automation for PPP loans. We here at BIG are still, working through all that. We definitely have learned the ways of that, and it's certainly complex. So I can't imagine what it's like to be the lender on the other end. So hopefully, I know there are a lot of Koreans who are figuring that out, but there's a lot more out there that haven't, and I know that's still sort of a thing out there that's hitting. The other one was a lot of people got these weird emails from the EIDL. So let me just talk about these two things real fast. One, PPP is the payroll protection program or payroll protection, whatever they're calling it these days. There's a lot of names for it. And then the EIDL is the something disaster loan. What is it? The EIDL stands for Emergency Industry Disaster Loan. That's what it is. And so those two things are very confusing. A lot of people applied for the idle, and then I've read where a lot of people got an email. We got some emails that are very confusing. There are a lot of documents out there. So if it is that you have folks that were expecting these idle loans, you may want to go out there and dig into it a little bit, because the idle loans are not coming through that we're seeing. We're not exactly understanding what they changed or how it's supposed to work. But initially, it was supposed to be a bridge loan for the PPP loan, and it was supposed to be sort of an instant up to $10,000 at $1,000 an employee. Don't know what happened with that, but now it talks about reapplying. So, but those were the two sides of the coin. Was the idle, which was just directly through the SBA, and you signed up on their site, and all you had to do was provide sort of a P&L and something else. And then there was the Paycheck Protection Program, which was you had to apply with a financial institution. So those two things are kind of out there, and still a little confusing for everyone. So with that in mind, just to close out the PPP discussion, I would expect that there are going to be a lot more consternation around that for anybody that's providing those, and you may want to continue to stay on top of that. We're just seeing a lot of confusion. I did talk to one credit union that had funded 2 or 3 of them. I'm not sure if you made it today. I don't see Pete on here, but from Pete Nolte from Vibrant Credit Union, I believe in Idaho, they had actually funded more than a few. So I'd be interested if you want to pop it in the everyone chat, anybody who's actually funded loans for PPP that was providing them through the SBA. It'd be interesting to know if anybody's managed to do that. I would imagine Kevin might have conquered that. So the next topic of discussion that I wanted to bring up is this idea of obviously that's being really kicked around quite a bit, which is the idea of reopening, the economy or reopening everything. And I was talking to Kevin Sarber about this. I don't know if he's on yet. Don't see him, but he might be on, and I'm just missing him. There's a lot of names on my screen, but Kevin and I were talking about one thing was these.
I'm here, John.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey.
First thing was we were talking about these branch of the future and how they were built to be sort of this removing barriers between you and your members, and all of a sudden it feels like you'd be better off with your giant, bulletproof glass and back to the way you were. You want to just chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think your point is right on. I think we spent the last probably 7 or 8 years when we talk about branches, we talk about kind of an open concept where there are no defined color lines, and there are teller pods where you're bringing the member around to kind of be hip to hip, so that the member can see the screen while the MSR is working with the member. No more bandit barriers or bulletproof glass or anything like that. The branch is wide open, with the exception of a few offices. And I think that provides some unique challenges going forward, because how do you social distance within the branch if you're supposed to be hip to hip? And how do you sit down with a member and sign loan docs in an office that probably doesn't accommodate a 6-foot or an 8-foot distance between you and the member? So, like you said, for those who haven't redone their branches, there are some advantages to having the old structure. And how do we move forward with those new branches and keep social distancing in mind and keep members coming into the branch when they need to?
Yeah, because one of the things we try to do with this town hall is to get ahead of things, right? And it seems like that if you have that situation at your branches, now is the time to start thinking about, while it's still kind of closed, how to reconfigure them to make that okay, right? What could you do temporarily or even more permanently to adjust for that when the time comes. And, you know, there's some other things that, you know, you and I were talking about, Kevin, one of which was one of the concerns I have is that if we were to open, let's say, and I'll use an example like, say, Chick-fil-A, right? So we decide we're reopening. Chick-fil-A opens their doors, they swing wide open, they're excited, they got all their staff back, and because we don't have vaccines or we don't have whatever it is that would make the public comfortable, not a lot of customers show up. And then what happens then? And I could see that same thing happening in the you know, even more so in the teller lines and the branches, because what we've done is we've forced a whole lot of members to digital that had never really done it before and were really kind of not planning on doing it. So do they stay? Do they start coming back? And if that pressure keeps up, then a lot of people converted the folks that were in the branches and the call center people, but do you wind up with both? Like, how do you plan for that? You know, and Kevin, I know you would, you know, in your previous life, this was a lot of what you did with the call center and branches and whatnot.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're going to have to be really wary. We all know that branch transaction volume has somewhat steadily been decreasing, and maybe in the last few years it kind of flattened the curve. But you know, who's going to come to the branch, particularly if we've pushed them to digital already? You know, and they've made that transition. How do you get them comfortable with coming back into the branch? You know, like you said, I think it's going to be really some interesting planning that has to go into how you accommodate that. But again, it's going to be another impact to trying to shrink the physical footprint of the branch while still giving members a place to come do transactions that they might not, you know, that there probably isn't a good way to do online. And that's our challenge going forward as technology folks, is to make sure that if a member does want to stay remote or they're quarantined and they can't leave, making sure that as many of the services as we can are available through digital.
Yeah, and you know, Mike, you want to just share what you just popped up there to everyone?
Yeah, I just did a story on FrontWave Credit Union here in San Diego, and they're in the process of redesigning their branches to kind of what Kevin was talking about, the whole hip-to-hip member teller relationship, where there's no, like Kevin was saying, there's no bulletproof glass, there's no barriers between the member and the teller. They can stand right next to the teller and look at the screen. Both of them can look at the screen and go, oh, that's my balance, and let's move this over here, and that type of stuff. That's the whole big promotion that they were doing, at least at this one branch where we did a story on. They're going to redo all the other ones kind of like that. But now I'm thinking, my gosh, since this has happened, are we going to be redesigning the branches now to go away from the hip to hip? Because you go into any type of grocery store, the few times that we are going to a grocery store, and now they all have the plexiglass between the customer and the cashier, and there's all sorts of other precautions they're taking. Like if you go to Trader Joe's, they only allow in, you know, certain number of people at the time, and then once those people leave, then they can let more people in. So this is going to, you know, people who are redesigning or thinking about building new branches or that type of stuff are going to have to really think about this in the near future. And I'm thinking about FrontWave, my gosh, and this branch was so cool, and it is cool. But now that this whole thing has happened, like, maybe we should be rethinking.
That's like a 9/11 event where the TSA had to rethink everything. And, you know, TSA was even invented at that point.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look at some of the older, like even San Diego is a great example. That airport wasn't really designed to have those TSA choke points where they are.
Not at all.
Another good example would be Dallas or Kansas City, MCI, where you could almost pull up to a gate and go in, where they had to put in all these separate TSA choke points. Emily from Michigan mentions that they're installing germ plexiglass guards, limiting one teller per pod. And it looks like Andrew's doing something as well. one of the things I've seen a lot in those areas is the stickers that are on the floor. I guess we have a lot to learn from the grocery stores. So the stickers are where you stand to get in line for a particular cashier or something like that, which kind of leads me to my next question, which is a couple questions. One, how many people can you let in the branch safely? So that's the first question. The second question is, do we limit the branch activity? Would you just say, look, the drive-through is what you use for this. Only people we're letting in are people who need these more complex transactions that Kevin's talking about. And maybe you put them in an office and slide the papers under the door. I don't know. And then you've got the whole issue of them covering their faces and, the masks. And so one of the things I was testing, Kevin, I don't know if you've tried this yet, but I would encourage everybody here who can to try this right now. Go ahead and throw on your mask and see if your iPhone will let you in. See if your facial recognition will work, or your Android or whatever. Mine didn't. It doesn't recognize me with a mask on. And so any technology that we have that's relying on that kind of facial recognition could be a problem as well.
Well, and the security in the branches too. We having somebody come through the doors with a bandana wrapped around their nose and mouth, number one, doesn't give you much of a chance to recognize that member, if it's a member, and two, from a security perspective, you would have your finger on the button, ready to consider that's a potential robbery that's going to take place. And so, it's one of the many things that we have to consider that's almost 180 degrees difference from what we would have done prior to this.
Yeah, Robert was saying Mobile Oil has the offices set up so the member goes in and meets with the rep virtually. So like a max headroom situation, where they can interact face to face with the rep on the phone or a computer. That's also, I think, what Financial Partners has with those ITMs, right, Kevin?
Yeah, they do. That's a normal thing for them. They and probably for a lot of credit unions as well. That takes place today to do basic teller transactions, and the staff is left for the more complex transactions. Now we're going to have to figure out how we handle all transactions across all channels, which has kind of been the whole goal all along. But very few of us have gotten to where we want with that, and this will just push us to move more quickly.
Hey, Robert.
Mobile Oil has the ITMs, which they use for simple teller transactions, but they actually took the offices and set them up so if you want to come in and fill out a commercial loan application, they'll invite you in. You go in and you sign up, and it points you towards an office, and you go sit down in the office, and you can do the application as though you're sitting there next to the rep and do it. Same with a mortgage loan, consumer loan, car loan, anything. It's all set up in those offices. Now they're closed right now for the same reason everybody else is, but in normal times, you can walk into the branch just like you normally would. They have nobody in the branch offices. There's nobody physically in there. When there's a concierge who points you to the office, and you go in and sit down with your rep who's on a screen.
Yeah,
but they also moved that just in the last month or so to where it's both online and on the phone, and you see the rep on the phone, and again can do most everything that you could do going into the branch.
Well, and it's funny, necessity is the mother of invention, but I remember working with you guys before. You had so many people out in the rigs, it seemed like that made a lot of sense. But now you're going to look like heroes. And, reality is there was probably a lot of people voting against that, going, no, you got to be closer to them. You got to hug on them, and you got to love on them and give them some stuffed animals. Real quick, to your point, you talk about the concierge. Emily was saying I think Emily's from Nacenda, if I remember right, New Mexico, but she's saying they're basing the number of members allowed in the branches. In Michigan. I apologize. There's another Emily who comes basing the number of members allowed in the branches by square footage with someone at the door overseeing the door. So, that's an interesting one. So that's, if I'm writing down things that people got to start thinking about, I guess it's, okay, what's the square footage of every branch? How much does it cost to put back these plexiglass things? And are the ones we have good, or do we have to get something else? The little stickers on the ground to space people out seems like another one. And then we talked about before about all the materials, like we need to go away from filling out papers and handing things back and forth. One of the things I noticed was, we were talking about touchless technology. There was somebody where, I went to, I had to go to Walgreens to pick up a prescription, and I wanted to get some Sudafed. And as you know, in this country, if you want to buy Sudafed, you've got to give blood and a lot of other stuff before you can do it. And the person, usually they would take my license and they would hold it in front of the screen and do everything. But this person just sat my license on the ground and didn't touch it, looked at it and said, "I'm done." So, there's a lot of that too. We don't want to be taking licenses from people. So, the other thing I'm thinking, Kevin, is there's going to be retraining.
Yeah.
Like, how do you convince yourself to stop grabbing that stuff if you've done it for years and years?
Grabbing that stuff, shaking hands, one of the first things you do when you go to greet a member at the concierge desk when they do the pass off is you reach out and shake their hand, and what's the proper way to greet someone in the new world? Are you going to try and bump elbows with them, or you can try and skip it? Some of the most basic things have to be thought through and like you say, retrained out to the front lines to make sure.
Well, and here's
well.
another thing. So my daughter, she's an executive assistant for a guy who owns like 10 restaurants in town. And what he's taken to doing with the big restaurants here in Colorado Springs is, since they're not open, he's catering. And it's going pretty well. I mean, and so with her, because she's not scheduling his travel, he's not really going anywhere right now, she's sort of been put into the catering group. And they're delivering, like, for example, they delivered Easter dinners for everyone. And so you could go online and buy, and they've got, their different restaurants have great food. It's kind of like the Waffle House guys selling their Waffle House, sauce or whatever. But but at first they told her, well, don't wear masks, you're creeping people out. Now they're like, well, people are upset because you're not wearing a mask. So what happens when you got a member with a mask and a member without a mask? Do we just say, oh, everybody has to wear masks? Is it mandated by the state? Then that solves the problem. Because maybe I don't want to stand next to the person who doesn't have a mask, I mean, there's so much. And that's what, Kevin and I started having this conversation about, just starting now to think about what it looks like to even open a branch. And then my other big fear is you do all this, you put in the sneeze guards, you add in the stickers, you get the people to watch everything, you fix everything, you get the hip to hip out of there, and then no one shows up. Then what? Is that when we start to, because for now we sort of have this excuse that people could be at home and some people aren't working and some people are, whatever. But once we do that, then what choice is there but to sort of contract? Am I wrong, Kevin? Or anybody else?
Yeah, I think, we obviously haven't been really good at predicting the future with opening the branches and doing this, right, leading up into the pandemic. So I'm not in a good place to be a good prognosticator on what the branch will look like in the future. I think we'll continue to do what we've been doing as far as, as an industry. The square footage of our branches has been gradually shrinking, and I think we'll do that. I think automation, like the ITM, PTM, video teller, I think, integrating that into the design gives us a chance to do some things that maybe some credit unions have struggled with, as far as expanding your hours and being able to cover with remote tellers that can help. I think there's some opportunities here, but I think it's going to be a challenge because we've just now, I think as an industry, really the momentum of the new branches has been kind of growing, and like Mike did the story on
Yeah, I was talking to Brian Romilly, and we actually had a credit union do this, which I'm not sure if they're on, but Vision's Credit Union out in Elmira, the touchless technology, is a big deal. And one of our credit unions took our Alexa product and put it in their branch. I think they called it an echo chamber, which was really cool because it was an echo, get it? But the idea of checking in, even the ITMs, you have to touch them, and in some cases. So this idea of touchless technology is going to be, I think, a big deal. And we're already starting to see a lot of that, just with what we've been doing, Kevin. I think Elizabeth is here. I know she's been looking into that as well. Elizabeth, you helped Visions with their echo chamber, didn't you?
They really, the great thing about that technology is it's very administrator friendly. So they really didn't need much help getting that set up.
Gotcha. But what did it
Yeah,
do?
I think the other thing, John,
Go ahead.
the other thing is, to make sure that, and I know a lot of credit unions are on the path, or at least have looked at it or have been considering it, but, the at the point of sale, being able to tap to pay and not having to touch the terminal, enter a PIN, sign. A lot of
Right.
local stores that, used to require signature for all purchases here have recently changed and are not requiring signatures anymore because people were complaining about having to touch the signature pad and the pen. So lots of interesting things on the point of sale side, and moving to a contactless card could be a really advantage at this point in talking to the members about a safe way to pay.
Yeah, and that's a good transition right there into the next topic. And then I was going to see if anybody wanted to talk. So the thing you were just saying, Kevin, is like with this downtime, there's sort of a tremendous opportunity. And one of the things that I was talking to Pete Nolte about at Vibrant Credit Union was they see this as an opportunity to really push digital. And one of the things that he told me, and this blew my mind, and we're experiencing the same thing, honestly, with Amazon and Google, was that they put an app out. They built an app inside like a week and a half to deal with some of the PPP loans and what they were doing. They got it into the Apple Store and published in 2 days. That's unheard of. And the reason for it is that, oh yeah, Mike's talking about using his Apple Watch for purchasing. Yeah, mobile wallet, a lot of people using those now, the tap and stick them with their phone. But this timing that we have is a good opportunity for two reasons. One, I asked him, I said, well, how much QA could you have done if you built it in, like a week? And he said, we didn't do a lot, but people are really forgiving right now. They're thankful to have the app. And so we're not getting trashed on, iTunes and on the reviews because they see us trying to push forward and help them. And so I thought, that's an interesting opportunity that right now, programming and QA and that sort of stuff is all stuff that's sort of indigenous, you will, to the indoors and not having to, you could almost turn the corner on a lot of that. So your point earlier about certain things that have to be done in the branch, now would be the time to identify, like to take the branch transactions, list them out and go, okay, what are the high ones that we could jump on right now and maybe get done before we reopen, and have those be digital to make it easier to deal with everything else.
I think, John, too, the unfortunate thing about in planning right now, and you talked about kind of moving branch staff, we close the branches, so we're moving them in the call center to deal with higher volumes in the call center, not just for calls, but calls, emails, and chat. So that is, the growth point right now. But the unfortunate thing is, over the next few months, being able to transition those folks into, I don't want to say collections, but member loan deficiency assistance or something.
That's a really nice way to put footing.
The unfortunate thing is that, we're going to have really, as the economy makes changes over this time, and some jobs come back and some don't, how are we going to deal with that, and how are we going to train our staff to be able to do that, by showing empathy to the member and trying to come up with creative solutions on how to help them through.
Yeah, and so, that's a great point. And I would put it out there, Kevin, for the folks on the call, if you want to just chime in on the chat. Are you guys expecting, if we were to gradually reopen, do you expect the call volume in the call center to go down or to equalize? Because my feeling is it won't. My feeling is because of the economic situation, it's going to stay at the level it is, and then it's just going to get absorbed into the branch if that's an option. But maybe I'm wrong. Anybody, if anybody wants to share some thoughts on that, do they see, when we talk about like going back to normal, that's, what you hear a lot in the news. But when I think of that, I think of this new normal, and that new normal includes an economic situation that's is untenable. That's going to require a lot of financial assistance in order to get through it, which of course is the charter of, all the people on this call. So what does that look like? I mean, you talk, you're jokingly saying loan deficiency assistance, but honestly, there probably needs to be even some sort of financial health and welfare portion of it. That's what honestly I would call it from a collection standpoint, to start helping people figure out how to budget to get back to good.
I agree. I think it's going to be, I think we learned a lot about that in 2008, 2009. But I think this one will be different because there's a lot of, number one, I think it's going to be a larger number of people. And once these first rounds of incentives are used, what's the impact of those? Or you just can't keep doing that forever, I think. But,
yeah. No, absolutely. So, I guess to sum that portion of it up, and then I want to jump over to Mike for a second before we maybe have a few people talk. Now is the time to start thinking about what that reopening of branches is, I feel like, and I'll probably write something around that. But I think it sounds like some of you're already out there installing the glass, you're already retrofitting. I think that's fantastic. And sharing all of that, what you're thinking, and there's probably some clever ideas out there on how to make that better for everyone. So I hope this is a place maybe where that can happen. Those ideas can get shared. Secondly, kind of following up on the digital perspective, and now's the time to curate your calls, to curate your branch traffic, even the drive-through. Start picking off the transactions that could be converted to digital, so that you can sort of, because my feeling is that Kevin's right, that in order to interact on the financial health and welfare perspective, or the loan deficiency group, that's a lot of talking and a lot of engagement. And so the way that we're going to have to equalize for that is by getting the shorter, quicker, more likely, upstream transactions in terms of digital moved over, so they can't be, or pardon me, the ones that are not digital can be done in digital, which should leave the room hopefully for working on having more of these relationship conversations with the members, which is really what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, I have a great story. I'm actually going to roll it out here soon. Been working on it for a long time, but I interviewed my aunt, my uncle, he's 89, and my aunt is 87. And I'll just be quick about the story. But one day I was over there having lunch, and when we got done with lunch, she had wrapped the sandwiches in tinfoil. We were on their farm. When she got done, she took the tinfoil and started like flattening it out, cleaned it, folded it back up, and put in the drawer. And I looked at her and said, they make more of that. You can go to this place called the grocery store and get more of it. And what she said was, you're right, but old habits die hard. And she had grown up in the Depression era. And I interviewed them on video. I decided to come back and I sat down and interviewed them because I wanted to find out what that felt like. And the first thing she said to me was, the banks all closed. And when they closed, I had about $10,000. And when they reopened, I had 5. And that was 4 days later, which was when FDIC was invented, which was that crash. But what she does remember more than anything was that bank, and it was a local bank in Missouri, like the Bank of Missouri or something. They got her through it. And she still banks with them to this day. And that that's a relationship that's now 60 years old or whatever. So this is the time when we're going to make those relationships that are going to be very lasting. And the way we're going to do it is by providing that financial health and welfare. But how will we do it in a world where we can't shake hands, where we can't look at the whites of their eyes to make a loan? And it's going to have to be using new technology and new methodologies and being innovative and clever about it, which we're really good at as an industry. When the chips are down, there's no better team to be with than the Crayons. So,
hey, John, one quick thing on that. We had a similar situation just with Easter this past weekend. My wife's family is kind of scattered across Canada, and our family is kind of scattered across California. And we had a Zoom call, and so that everybody could kind of talk. And, I think we were far from original there. I think there were a lot of those, but having my wife's parents, who are both in their 80s, trying to figure out how to Zoom, and even the concept of the fact that, who's that? She's pointing at the screen and then getting real close to the screen so that
like Robert is right now.
Yeah. So it's making people comfortable with those new ways of interacting. That's going to be a challenge too. And I think having the video makes a huge difference in those get-togethers.
And it could be as simple as using Zoom with your members or something like it, Teams, stuff like that. So I agree. I absolutely agree. So I just think that this is the opportunity to build some relationships that Crayons could really, really, again, just like we did the last time, but maybe this time we could come out with more market share. I hope so. So with that in mind, I want to just switch around and see what everybody's up to. Is there anyone, I was going to throw it to Mike, and I actually want to throw it to Glenn too. Like I said, I know not everybody wants to talk. Well, but before I do that, Melissa, is there anyone who's reached out to you directly to speak? I want to make sure we don't gloss over them. Okay, she says no. All right, so Mike, what you got?
What do I got? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I did like 7 interviews yesterday, and each of them were absolutely knocked them out of the ballpark. One of them was with Mr. Michael Matone from Mid-Hudson Valley Federal Credit in New York, in kind of the epicenter of what's going on.
Oh, yeah, aren't they in Poughkeepsie?
Somewhere in there, yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
really familiar with that area, but he's like right outside the city. But so he's really familiar, and they have like curfews and all sorts of just crazy stuff that's going on there, just to kind of get a handle on it. But I wanted to segue what you guys are talking about, the video thing. He was telling me that their ITMs were very popular. The video tellers, that was very, very popular, what was going on right now for them. And and that was a good one. So let me see what else. Oh, I talked to Gigi Highland from the foundation. And we were talking about how all this is going to change consumers' behavior. Will this really prompt people to save more? Because in our conversations previous to all this, there was always this, gosh, how can we get consumers to save? Because something's going to happen. There's an emergency, and there's some crazy statistic out there that, if your refrigerator breaks, people don't have enough in their savings to even pay for a new refrigerator. It's just some crazy statistics. So we talked about how this whole thing may change consumer behavior, like you were talking about, John, with people coming out of the Great Depression, how that changed their financial behaviors. And so there was a really interesting conversation with her. And they also have like 6 tips on using the economic impact payment to share with members. So that was a pretty cool one. I had a super interesting conversation with the World Credit Union Council's Brian Branch, and talking about what's going on globally and how we can learn from that. And we got onto the topic of how Ukraine, their government actually shut down their credit unions because reason number one, they weren't classified as essential companies to stay open. And reason number two, which I thought was even bigger, is that a lot of them, or most of them, didn't have digital services. So they couldn't serve their I guess consumers over there. And so I just thought that was super interesting, thinking that this is even more incentive to really up your ante, up your game in the digital service offering. So really interesting conversation with Brian on the kind of the global perspective. And then I also talked with NAFQ's General Counsel Carrie Hunt about COVID-19 relief legislation. And we talked about the whole payments protection program and how the intentions are great. Obviously, we all know that, but the execution of it is not so awesome. So we're all kind of going through that and trying to iron that whole thing out. So it's just some really, really cool conversations I had yesterday with a lot of these folks. And I also talked to earlier, I think it was late last week, I talked to the folks at Lender Close with Omar Jordan and then also one of their clients, Collins Community Credit Union, I believe, who is using now their remote online notarization technology that Iowa just passed a bill, so making it, I guess, legal or doable for everybody there, and how that's really kind of a godsend for a lot of people out there right now who are having to buy and sell things, cars and houses and things like that right now. So I thought that was really interesting, and how that's such a crucial part of the process. And now you're able to do that online now. And the other thing I just want to touch on real quick, I talked to Brian Moffett from C Recovery, which is basically a collections company that PSCU owns. And he was talking exactly what you guys are talking about with the collections, and how we're going to have to show a lot of grace and empathy and being kind of a financial counselor with a lot of these folks. Not right now, but 60 to 90 days from now is when all of this stuff is really going to hit. So just some fascinating conversations I've had with people lately. So I've got more to come too. So just really fascinating conversations with everybody.
Yeah, I think the collections aspect, but you brought up something that I'm gonna jump in and speak to, which is one thing I think is going to happen for sure, Mike, is that, and it kind of speaks to one of our sponsors here. There's no way even with a vaccine, with the way things are, that we aren't going to have to switch to some sort of digital identity. And so I think that's coming. And you've read articles about Apple throwing their hat in the ring, Google throwing their hat in the ring. I still believe that, well, first of all, I know for a fact that distributed ledger technology is going to be the important piece of that. And here's why. We can't live in a world where Mike can forge a piece of paper that says he's COVID-free or whatever and wander into a branch with 30 people, right? We also can't take every person's temperature on the way through the door and expect that to work either. So we've got to have something that could be digitally validated and is very difficult to forge, that also doesn't give away a lot of other information. It's got to be sort of it's what we call in the technology world a zero proof, a zero knowledge proof. It's a way of me telling you something without you ever learning anything about me or me ever having to learn anything about you, but we're able to share this one piece of information that allows us to do business or to interact in a certain way. Mm-hmm. I would fully expect we are going to have to move to that quickly. Bill Gates had a great AMA on Reddit. If you haven't read it, get it, Reddit. Reddit. A great AMA, Ask Me Anything on the Reddit channel, where he really pushed on that. Microsoft could throw their hat in the ring, but what I see is some sort of national registry that is blockchain related, so that it has consensus and it has no double spend and all the other things that got to go with it, that is ironclad, that proves if we ever get to is it pluricity is the antibody name, I guess, or, knowing you have antibodies or immune, or knowing that you've been vaccinated, or whatever it is that we wind up with, it's not going to be enough to show everybody the big chunk that's missing out of your arm, which, probably a few of us on this call have. Which one was that for? Is it polio, or I forget,
Yeah, I can't
whichever one
remember.
it was.
I can't
It's a
remember.
huge chunk.
Smallpox.
What's that?
Smallpox.
Kevin should know. He probably has it. But it's going to have to be something along those lines where, just thinking out loud, I think the digital platform is going to be a big one. And digital identity is going, what it looks like, I don't know. I know that the folks from MemberPass, they opened up the rest of their registry, this week, and they shared with Dante shared with me. I'll just bring up the site real fast. I'll share it real fast. But the registry is actually open now, and what this is it's just the start of it. What it does is it says, okay, let's register the credit union as a digital entity, so that then things underneath the credit union can be registered and verified by the credit union and other credit unions without having to know about it. So this is the first step. You have to create yourself in this registry. And so if you haven't checked it out, you will. And I'm not doing that to sell. This is going to happen. What John Ainsworth and I have been talking about, along with the board of Seal Ledger, is how do we engage in legislation to get it to where we can use this same registry for maybe the COVID vaccinations, as well as digital identification of members who are wearing masks and all the other things that Kevin brought up. So if you haven't checked this out, I'll put the link in the thing, but you should check it out. This is coming. I don't see any, people often ask me, hey, John, how do you predict innovations for the future? And one of the first things I look at is what we're doing working, and does it feel stupid or not? And it's going to feel stupid to have someone take your temperature every time you go in a building. That's not tenable. And so this is the only thing that is tenable when it's a life or death situation around that, in my mind. So
have you seen, John? I thought somewhere in, maybe China.
Russia's already doing it.
What's that?
Russia's doing it, but it's not good. It's no privacy to it.
Right. Yeah, and that's the big concern right now, is the privacy factor of it. But I thought I read somewhere in Southeast Asia, maybe it was South Korea or somewhere, there's an app on somebody's phone where it's color coordinated, and before you walk into like a grocery store or a financial institute or something like that, you have to show your phone, and it depends on what color it is. I'd have to go back and find.
Yeah, that is South Korea. There's actually another app I'll just share real quickly. It's called PrivateKit, and it just came out from MIT. And what it does is it tracks where you go to let you know if you interact with people who had COVID, or if there was a COVID breakout there.
Right. Isn't that what the new Apple and Google thing, isn't that what they're working on too?
Yeah, this one's called SafePass. It's already out there. You can download it now. And basically it logs where you go, and then you import from MIT their outbreaks and whatnot, and then it checks overlap. And so it's pretty interesting. But again, it's secure location logging in that it's all been tokenized, but we're going to have a tough time getting people in this country to not feel like this thing's going to be completely used by the NSA and everything else. But yeah, there's Melissa pointed out, China rules. It's software. It's China that pointed at that. Yeah.
There's also another good story on Finovate's blog about 3 ways digital identity is combating the COVID-19 crisis. So for those who are readers of the Finovate blog, which I am, it's a quick little read.
Yeah. So to me, that's going to be interesting, because I can see where that concierge at the door that Robert was talking about, they're going to have to scan each one of those. And, not so on top of, can you even go in? It's going to be, at some point, if we just have to get to the point where we're going to have to know whatever that is. And I'm excited because I think it will usher in the era of digital identity services, and this will expedite. Culture shift is difficult, but you know what the greatest thing, change agent for culture shift is catastrophe. And that's what we're going through right now. I mean, we've had our ways changed for many years for many different things. I just another interesting story. So my grandmother absolutely loved and considered it a delicacy if she got it, liver and onions. Now, how do you get to love liver and onions? Well, I'll tell you how you get to love liver and onions. If you grew up in World War II, they said, hey, you can't keep the good protein. That's got to go over to the men who were fighting. But the problem was Americans didn't have a palate for the other organs and things that came out of the cows and things like that. So the habit change they did was they basically said, they started putting out recipes. So you go into the butcher and they'd say, here's some liver and here's a recipe to make it. And one of the ones that was considered an absolute delicacy was liver and onions. And so to this day, that's a change agent that happened in American culture because of World War II. And that's not unlike what we're going through here in some ways, because it requires a lot of giving from the populace. It requires a lot of change from everyone else. Think about it. You've got people like Ford who went from making cars to ventilators, and that is not a trivial thing. We all make it out to be like, oh yeah, start making ventilators, but going from making one thing to, just imagine, one day I came in and yelled at you and said, you don't make videos anymore, Mike. You make cake, and I need lots of cake. I need it now.
Sad.
Yeah. So it's just a shift, and that shift is also going to be represented in our world too, and how well we handle that is going to be indicative of our future in this country as credit unions, because we can either come out of this stronger or we're going to come out of it. When I started in this industry, there were 26,000. Now there's 5,000 or 6,000, and I'd like to see us gain as opposed to lose on the way out of this one. And during the World War II, credit unions were well known, and they're the ones that sold the stocks and the bonds. They're the ones that pushed that. You can find all kinds of really cool credit union memorabilia from World War II, because they were just coming out around then. We'd had the 32 conference here in Colorado, and then it grew from there. There were a lot of credit unions that were forming around the workforce that was out there outproducing the tanks. And I'll leave you with this quote from FDR about World War II. He said, a powerful enemy must not only be outfought, but it must be outproduced. And that's what I think we're facing in this country, is we have to outproduce it in vaccines. We have to outproduce it in financial services. We have to outproduce it in clever innovations. We have to outproduce it in so many ways. But the good news is that that's something Americans are really good at. If anybody's going to find a vaccine fast, it'll be us. So I'm excited about that. So with that, we have about 5 minutes left. If there's anybody that wants to jump in. Oh, by the way, you mentioned talking to Hudson Valley. They're actually credit union voice registry group. So they use our Alexa. So we're actually doing a promo this week. You guys should see an email on that. So if you'd like to get a Alexa app and a Google app out there that can tell people what's open, what's not open, what your times are, what your services are, what to expect, and not have to bother your staff and get it done for about $1,500 and have it out there in a couple days, go to cuvoiceregistry.com, simply sign up. Elizabeth is back on the case, and we will get it knocked out very quickly without bugging you or bothering you. We just get the information from your website and put it out there. And then you can tell your members. I could see Alexa check-ins as a way of checking into the branch going forward, so you don't have to touch stuff. What are you here for? And then, okay, it'll be about this long. I'll call your number when you're ready. That's going to happen. Kevin, you have anything for the good of the order before we go?
Hey, John, I was wondering, and anybody out there, I know you and I looked at this years ago, and I'm not sure if the technology ever took off or if anybody's even using it or tried to use it in a pilot, but remember the 3D,
Oh,
you
yeah.
kind of went into somewhat of a cubicle, but it was 3D and it was really good technology. And I can't imagine what it would look like today with all the advances that have been there. But just another way to make the interaction with someone digitally more comfortable, more personal. I thought that was kind of a cool thing, but I hadn't seen anybody who picked it up and used it, and I didn't know if anybody on the phone had seen it, or even more importantly, had tried it or used it.
Yeah, I saw that at an NAQSO conference years ago. Mike, you were there with me. You'd sit down in a little cubicle, and they had a guy who was remote who was being projected because it was like a prism thing in front of you. It was like you're sitting in a cubicle, and you literally had the guy. And I remember the thing that struck me most about that demo was the guy, I reached out to shake his hand when he reached out to shake his hand, even though I knew he wasn't real. You remember, I think it was definitely was in Orlando, I think, when we were there.
Yeah.
This was like in 2012 or 13 or something. So Kevin's right. But yeah, I think virtual reality and augmented reality are going to play a part in this. If you have not played with any virtual reality or augmented reality lately, it has gone crazy, absolutely nuts. That field is growing quickly. Also, I would say robotics, not just robotics in the terms of robotic process automation, but actual robots who are controlled by tellers and people and things. And that's coming together as well. Actually, I'll get Harry to come on and your show. Harry and I will come on your show and demonstrate our robots, because
that'd be awesome.
Cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw somewhere else that you can actually like replicate yourself as a 3D version of yourself, and that person or your replication.
Yeah, that's called holoportation.
Yeah, you can put yourself in a meeting or something like that. So it's really funky.
Yeah, I'll find those links and we'll post them as part of this video.
Fascinating stuff.
Well, I guess just to sum it up, make sure you're planning for the reopening. If you've got good ideas, if you're getting ready to reopen, I'm sure Mike would love to talk to you.
Yeah.
And find out about how did you find your sneeze guards, and how did you get the stickers, and how do you determine how many people are coming in, and what do you do with the masks? I like to talk more about that. I think we're gonna have one more of these next week, and then I'm just gonna take it on a week by week basis. Like I said, if you like these and they're valuable, please, please, please let us know, because I don't want to do them and waste your time either. So, we're trying to, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you were here, Doug. Hey, Doug, you want to jump in before we go? Our sponsor, Doug Burke, with Cousins.
Thanks, John. Yeah, sorry, I missed a lot of it. I had a co-op share branching meeting, so we're dealing with, a number of things, as you can imagine, from people not being able to have valid, non-expired driver's license and so forth. So that's
wow,
we've been dealing with today.
Oh yeah, because their driver's license would expire, they can't get a new one.
Nope.
Huh.
DMV's closed.
Such a domino effect of things.
I just pity the poor people who are going to go into DMV after this is all done. It's like you thought lines were bad before. It's only been closed for 2 months, and now everybody's going to try to do it. I wouldn't even want to be near there. Good luck when that opens. The only thing I'd like to say, John, is just, we're still working on that survey, and have gotten a lot of feedback, kind of what things are looking like with Credians, what's happening to their different delivery channels, what's happening to their goals, their business plans, all that type stuff. And so we're going to be wrapping that up next week and gathering all the results to be able to share it. So one more push, and then it's coming all together. So
great. Yeah, and we'll definitely go over those next week. And your team has done a tremendous job, and thank you for everyone who took the time to fill it out. It's going to be extremely valuable for everyone. So we'll have those results to share at next week's town hall. And we just can't thank you guys enough for taking the time. Be safe, and don't hesitate to reach out if you guys need anything. And there's so much to think about. I can't even, it's hard for me to even keep my mind around it. So I think I'm going to go back to
trying to figure out how to make a robot use a drill. That seems like that might be easier.
You might be onto something.
I might be. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, keep up the good work out there too. You guys are doing some amazing stuff.
Yeah,
Thanks,
absolutely. All
John, for what you do.
right. Take care, everyone.